Important things that is coming. Okay, so we've talked about a couple different ways that a company could be utilizing their own internal resources to attract talent. We talked about job boards posting ads, maybe not necessarily netting the greatest results, but maybe worth putting an egg into that basket just in the event that you get the right person. Would you guys agree though that like recruiting has to be like a top-down initiative? You can't just one day wake up and say, hey, Mr. Engineer, help us find all your friends, please refer them over, if you haven't talked about it from day one, right? I've read kind of blogs from CEOs and heard like CEOs kind of talk about what's important in growing a company and like greatness of a product, greatness of like marketing to attract customer. And I think the great ones always come back and say, it's not about that, it's about attracting the top talent on board your team and they ingrain that into the culture of the company. Like Bill Gates' famous quote is, one great engineer is worth more than 1,000 good ones. It's a very good argument for justifying the fees that we're paid, right? So ingrain that into like the culture of your company and then asking them to go out and find referrals. I think it becomes that much easier. On that note, when does it make sense to use a recruiter? Should you solely rely on a recruiter? Should you rely on a recruiter along with using multiple other resources? Why even rely on a recruiter?
I think you should just use a recruiter. I mean, we're contingency based.
What does that mean for people that don't know?
Okay, so we don't make money unless we make a placement.
I'm really hungry until I do my job.
You have to have 5 or 6 different avenues to find people. And if you cut yourself off, and you can weigh that at the end of the day, is this person that I'm looking at through this recruiter worth his $30,000 fee? But if you're not working with a recruiter, then you're not going to have access to that guy. And it doesn't cost them anything to at least have access to those candidates. I think a big problem that companies have is they only start interviewing when their need becomes pretty urgent. I think companies need to be in a constant state of interviewing people. Timing is everything. And that perfect guy may not be looking when your need is urgent. So swoop him up when it's maybe not so urgent, and at least he's in place when the time is right.
We spend all of our days talking till we're blue in the face, convincing our candidates that they need to be opportunistic, that they need to understand that great job opportunities can be fleeting, and that you have to be ready in your career to say, I'm relatively happy here, but I understand that there could be something better out there. Whenever that something better comes along, I need to be prepared mentally, emotionally, all those kinds of things to make that move. I think very much, you're absolutely right. Our clients need to be, and companies in general need to be in the same way. And whether you're using a headhunter or not, if you are, Joe Post startup and you're, 10 or 12 people, and you have somebody who you look at their resume and you go, wow, this guy could really be a game changer, you've got to be willing to take that person on at any given time, not just because you don't have an open rec.
Yeah. Just to play like devil's advocate here, there's so many other issues that go into hiring. Like, let's say, for example, if I'm a CEO of a company, I mean, there's funding, there's different product initiatives that I'm working on. Just because someone's a great engineer that I'd love to have on board doesn't mean I have like the financial resources to do it. Doesn't mean there's like a place to put him. I can't just bring someone on board and have him like sit there. There has to be something to do with him.
Yeah, but I think it's a CEO's job to take that look from maybe a standpoint of a little bit farther back. You know what I mean? You can't just be looking at what's going on right in front of your face. You have to see the good picture. And like Boris said, the big picture is you need the best people in place to do what you want to do.
My thoughts are that the CTO and like Chief Products Officer should be making your argument, and the CEO should be the visionary and say, you know what? At the end of the day, the right business decision is to bring this guy on, because in 6 months, whenever we're ready to launch that next product, whenever we're ready to do this, we're going to need him, and we're going to want him to be here, and we're going to wish we had him. And I think it's that CEO and it's that kind of that big visionary job that, and I hope that the CTO and the Chief Products Officer are on board with this. But I definitely think it's the CEO's responsibility to be able to say, we need to think big, be big, and be opportunistic whenever there's the right kind of talent out there, and say, what, if I have to skimp on, catering lunch an extra day a week to pay for this guy, then what, that's just something I need to do. So
I think Google's also kind of changed the game with the way that the whole talent pool is being played. Google pretty much took the standpoint 8 years ago, whatever, back in like the early 2000s, late 90s, that we're just going to get the best guys on board, however it may be.
And we'll find a place for it.
Now they're just making products, whatever, to utilize the talent that they have on board. But that was pretty much the standpoint. We're just going to get the smartest, best engineers out there, and then deal with them after that.
Just as a side note, I actually heard from Candy yesterday a pretty good argument about why he hates Google, because Google's hired so many people who have such inflated egos with all their PhDs that he's literally told me that internally in Google it's a battle of egos. You sit next to somebody who I got their PhD from Stanford next to a guy who got their PhD from MIT, and both think they know everything in the world, and literally it's become a battle of egos.
So it's basically like any sales room USA. I've never worked in a sales room where there weren't inflated egos all over the place.
And actually,
but we're talking about engineers.
And I would argue that that's a fantastic thing in a market where innovation really is the driver of all of our economy.
Yeah.
I would say that you put ego and ego against ego and say who can come up with a better app, and I would argue that that's why Google's where they're at today, is because they put those egos side by side.
Yeah.
And you know what? I'm the guy. All right, everybody. I think ego, to an extent, as long as kept in somewhat level of check, is a great thing. So I think it really does motivate you to be the best and to produce the best and to want to be the best. And if you stack up two guys with egos that also have the skills to build world-class software, I'm loving that if I'm Sergey Brin.
I think ego's a great thing as long as it doesn't cross
cross
that line into arrogance. Then it's always a positive thing. That's what drives people. That's what makes people take that next step.
It kind of is capitalism.
Yeah, they don't want to get outdone by the next guy. They're like, oh, I got my comp science degree from whatever Stanford. I can't let this MIT guy beat me. So maybe that'll drive him to do something better.
So is there a right way to use a recruiter as part of your overall hiring plan? So let's say, okay, fine, you're gonna drop a little bit of money on posting ads. Let's just throw the ads up there, see what trickles in, right? Then you're going to motivate your troops and offer them up a couple $1,000, whatever it is, referral bonuses, and you're gonna mine that part of the talent pool. How do you use a recruiter? Do you use a recruiter to find one specific position, one specific diamond in the rough? Do you use a recruiter to give them a profile and say bring on as many of these as you can? We have different clients using a bunch of different types of avenues. What's right? What's wrong?
Oh, I'd say yes.
Yes at all.
I think just like we've talked about the whole time, it's important to motivate your troops. It's important to do all of this, and it should almost be like you talked about. Think of it like as a reverse triangle, and all it leads like it's an upside down triangle. At the top of it is referrals, it's recruiters, it's all these things, and it's just a flow chart. And at the bottom of that triangle, when you get down to the peak, it's a hire. And you want all of those avenues kicking on all cylinders. You want to have a recruiter who's out there looking for that one specific guy that you need on your team. You want that recruiter also to know, though, that if you have this profile of a person, that you're going to want to know about them also. And that works for everybody, and all you're doing is driving it down to a hire. You want to make sure you have your entire company firing on all cylinders. And I think that, maybe I'm really just in the mood of cutting my legs out from underneath me today, but I think it's absolutely important to have a very balanced recruiting attack. And I definitely 120% feel like we're a huge part of that. But I do definitely feel like we're only a part of that. And you need all of those other things driving in. But you also can't, I don't think you can afford to not have us as part of that.
As much as we want exclusive business and them to just kind of go about their day and us fill every open position, it's not smart for them to exclude some of those other avenues. It just makes sense for them to cover them, right?
The bottom line is
if you can get a phenomenal hire off a $25 post from Craigslist, why the hell not?
You should
it makes
do that.
Right,
phenomenal business sense to do that.
At the same time, why not just open up all your recs to the recruiters? No, I'm serious.
No,
honestly.
right, why not? Right?
Why not? Because there's no guarantee that you have to hire the person, but if you don't, then you're limiting your access to good candidates. And if you have a great candidate who comes from a recruiter, maybe hold him to a higher bar. Is this guy worth the extra $20,000? Now, on our end, that means we're going to get a bunch of shitty job orders, but it's our job to qualify those and to make sure that a placement can be made there.
Right.
I think that's what the balance is.
Yeah, in that case, probably a little bit of a different sort of mentality needs to be taken. They need to qualify recruiters and only choose the right ones to work with, as opposed to blasting it out to everyone in the market, because then their time's going to be wasted. That's probably their concern,
They
right?
should definitely be working with the right recruiters, the ones who are doing innovative stuff, like the video blogs. And things like that,
I feel like we're probably just kind of running under the assumption today of, maybe this is a whole other blog post on how to qualify a recruiter, but I feel like that we're kind of running under the assumption today that hiring a good recruiter is what I'm talking about. We're talking about that reverse pyramid of needing needing to put 2 or 3 or ideally
It's a good recruiter, not just a recruiter.
Yeah, a good recruiting agency up there on that list. And I think that, I think it's absurd, ridiculous to not have other resources running also. But I think it's equally as absurd, ridiculous to not have us as part of that.
I think it'd be I think it'd be an amazing project if we could take some of the bigger clients where we place numerous candidates, see how much money they gain via those candidates. And over the course of 4 placements, maybe they paid us $100,000. But if those candidates brought in millions of dollars in innovations, then
100% did.
100% did. That makes I think we can calculate that and make an even stronger argument on our behalf.
I think one of the strongest arguments is going to be look at some of the startup companies that still pay us the fees. I mean, hey, nobody in this room is going to sit here and nobody's going to sit here in this room and accuse us of being cheap. or not, and yet companies with limited startup capital still pay us our fee, and I think that's because CEOs realize that at the end of the day, we bring a value, and that value is bringing an exceptionally high quality candidate to the table, and I think that's what the difference maker is.
So I think we made the case that a recruiter makes sense as opposed to turning this into like a commercial for us or recruiting.
Why?
Let's throw out some like good like unique kind of tips and like techniques that they could use to actually like drive talent while not using a recruiter. Like maybe utilizing LinkedIn, maybe utilizing Facebook, utilizing some of the social networks. Let's throw out some like pretty interesting tips on the next step.